if we know how to do that to generate the file out, we could do it just as well, in the VA Smalltalk image, reading the stuff directly out of an MCZ file. But we didn't do that. Will we do it? Maybe.
It would be really bizarre. I mean, we're talking about this whole de facto standard thing. We could end up with a de facto standard of this is the protocol used to communicate between all the small talks, just Monticello.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that would be really interesting as well.
That's right, because that has been kind of one of the sticking points. I think between the various Smalltalk implementations is there's no real good mechanism for passing code around.
Now, every vendor and every open source system seems to have their own half-baked file importer for various things that works for months at a time before one vendor or another decides to fix or change something.
One thing that I found interesting in the 3.0 process was something that Julian Fitzel pushed. And that was he made a private little mailing list between all the people working on Seaside from all the different Smalltalks. So there was yourself, John, myself, Julian, who else was in it? The guy from GNU Smalltalk, I've forgotten his name, very sorry.
Yeah.
And
Paolo Bonzini.
Yeah, and basically we were discussing various porting issues between the different Smalltalks for Seaside. And what happened was several Smalltalks, VisualWorks, GNU Smalltalk, and VA Smalltalk. It's good. I don't think I'll ever be able to break that habit.
I won't either.
Yeah. So we ended up making changes to our Smalltalks to make them more compatible and not so much more ANSI compliant. These were all issues that were sort of off the edge of ANSI. So the process of making Seaside work on all these different Smalltalks made all of our Smalltalks slightly more compatible.
That's right. Julian had come to visit us in the Raleigh lab. I guess it was early December last year, and he and I sat down and talked about the porting issues and kind of what Greece should look like. And I think that was sort of the genesis of this little mailing list that he put together and that drove those changes. And I know that we made a number of changes in VA Smalltalk, one or two which might not have been too popular with our customers, but
like what?
Well, it was actually an issue that having to do with ANSI Smalltalk rather than the Greece effort, but it was brought out by the Greece effort. We were unaware of the issue before that, and that was the way that substrings worked. Substrings in VA Smalltalk would answer empty strings if at the ends of the source string. So you would get one more string as a result from VA Smalltalk than anybody else. And it seems that that actually did not match the ANSI specification, because I guess the ANSI specification matched everybody else, and we were kind of the odd ones out. So we changed.
You changed it, and then it busted people's code because they expected it to work the non-ANSI way.
Right, and we did provide a replacement method that did work the way the old method did. That was called, if I remember right, all substrings instead of just substrings. And we did cover it in our migration guide, and so it's not a super big issue, but we did have one or two customers who ran into it as a problem.
It really makes me wish that Smalltalk had the ability to. I'm going to overload the word namespace here, but namespace, what it is you import. So in this particular case, if your customers were using Smalltalk 1.0 and then you come up with Smalltalk 1.1 that has this change in it, all of their code just keeps working the way it did until they decide to go to 1.1, in which case they can go look at the porting guide. That kind of modular system would be fantastic, but I just don't see it ever happening, probably in any language. You can't even do it in C. You install a new version of libc, then you need to be very careful to segregate your include files and the compiled lib files and all that kind of stuff. It's just incredibly difficult to do on any scale. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like possibly an impossible to solve problem right there.
Yeah. I think you're right there. You know, we are trying to do a much better job of actually documenting the migration issues, release to release. And,
What about a deprecation marker? Because we've been discussing this and we've started to sort of informally do it in various methods where we've deprecated something, is to have that method call a deprecated method to give you a warning, and Seaside does that as well.
right. You know, and I think that's a great thing in Seaside. We've got something like that on the list of 1,001 things to be done.
Well, that's what
This
you need to hire these new people for, right?
Yes.
This might be another one of those things where Seaside ends up driving a de facto standard just by having done something that it's easier to conform to.
Right. You know, at least there's something of a pattern so that people are used to the notion of getting deprecated messages or exceptions in there
I'm
from
curious
the
about
systems.
I'm curious about something else in terms of your customer base. I mean, there's been a web framework in VA Smalltalk for eons. I mean, back in the day, in VisualWorks, you had Visual Wave, and then we've had the Web Toolkit, and you had some kind of servlet SSP kind of thing in VA Smalltalk as well. What kind of uptake do you see happening with Seaside and VA compared to using that older stuff?
And so we had something called Web Connection, um, which actually was a really nice framework for its time. And one of the really nice things about it was that it performed extremely well. Um, but going forward, our recommendation almost universally is Seaside. We haven't invested recently in upgrading Web Connection.
Yeah, I would say that tends to be our story too. It's sort of, you can almost unload a little bit of the burden by saying there's a community over here that will be able to answer your questions. They've got websites, they've got documentations, they've got examples. It's very, very lively. So I think that's a pretty good answer for us for the majority of web development needs. Some people are pushing the boundaries and using the web browser with HTML5 and JavaScript with jQuery as a really smart client and using Smalltalk as a backend, but those people tend to roll their own frameworks. They don't really need much in terms of infrastructure. They certainly don't need Seaside. But for the majority of people building web apps, Seaside's a convenient answer for the majority of their tasks.
Yeah, that's right. You know, we have customers who are in the same situation who have essentially built their own frameworks and are very happy with them, and wouldn't be looking at Seaside because they're just not in the business of building GUIs. They're building these things as servers, not web servers in the way of saying, well, they use SOAP and they use these other things as protocols, but servers nonetheless. And they're quite happy, and we continue to support their needs.
Well, one thing you mentioned about Seaside being more ubiquitous that Michael brought up, I had an experience with Seaside the other day, just looking for information that kind of prove what Michael just said, then kind of alludes to what you were just saying as well, that I guess if you have a customer using VA Web Connection, or what we had somebody using Web Toolkit, basically the answer to getting, if you have a problem, you have to contact support, or if you're internal like I am, you can contact the engineer. Whereas with Seaside, you can actually Google and find real results. You know, it's the first time, one of the first times in Smalltalk that I can remember being able to Google for information and actually get something useful. I found answers on Stack Overflow of all places.
Stack Overflow, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That may be a first.
Well, that's a big breakthrough. I mean, the thing is about Smalltalk is it's classically been the case that you weren't able to find answers. But with Seaside, you just mentioned you've got that community. What's nice is that since it's now common across VA and VisualWorks and Object Studio and other Smalltalks, and you know, Squeak and Faro obviously, you can Google this stuff and find real answers. You don't have to have the expert in your back pocket.
I think that's a really good point, Jim. And the fact that we all sort of depend on the one Seaside book and contribute to it, I think is also a really great thing, because it means that you know, there is a set of documentation that is ubiquitous and that everyone can point to and say, you know, go read that section. That's the way it works on all of the Smalltalks.
Well, you know, there's another thing too, is that migrations from one Smalltalk to another are pretty rare unless you're talking about, you know, some of the legacy products like BSE. But having customers feel like they could move, even if they never do or never even really intend to, if they feel like they're not locked in, even though they might end up being more or less effectively locked in, the fact that they're using Seaside and Glorp means that they feel a whole lot safer using your product or our product or Faro or Squeak, because they feel like they have choices, even if, you know, they're using product-specific things.
That's exactly true.
Doesn't anybody else think it's kind of ironic that the GUI pioneered by Xerox with Smalltalk driving it all is the thing that is one of the least compatible areas between all the Smalltalks and is effectively being abandoned for this web stuff?
I guess it is a bit ironic, but life moves on.
And we'll be getting rid of that mouse thing too, that those Xerox people tried to push on us as well soon with all this touch stuff.
Yeah.
Well, so let me take a look forward then. You know, you've mentioned a little bit about where you plan to go, but release-wise, what release level are you at with VA Smalltalk now, and what's your plan for the coming year? I mean, I know you're going to talk about this obviously at ESOG, but is there anything you can say about that now before ESOG?
We're at release level 8.0.2 right now, and our sort of stake in the ground is 2 releases a year. So I will be talking a little bit about 8.03 at ESUG, and you know, we expect that to be available sort of in the late November time frame, assuming nothing untoward happens between now and then. And it would be really nice if we could get Seaside 3.0 locked down before then, because it you know, Seaside 3.0 seems to be a target that keeps moving away from us.
So
Julian marked it 3.0 nearly a month ago, and people keep making changes. So it's never, there is no 3.0 level right at the moment where you can say that's it.
I'm curious about what Instantiations might do in terms of exposing the Smalltalk developers to the outer world, right? Some of us at Syncom have blogs and we engage in IRC conversations. We go to these conferences. Well, James and I, we do this podcast and we try to get as many people on as we can to talk about Smalltalk stuff. So the IBM Smalltalk, VA Smalltalk has always been a very hush-hushed sort of environment. And the only person that I could point a finger at who has actively gone out there in recent times to talk about this stuff is you. So
Hmm.
if you're hiring on new people and you've got the people that are there right now,